OK, my apologies for the delay. We'll go ahead and get started here. So we have picked a new topic here. So it's data science is a brand new emerging discipline. So we are going to talk about some ethical aspects of data science. A lot of these, as it will become evident while we discuss, a lot of these things, some of you may have heard of it. Some of the experiments that I will talk about, some of the controversies that I will talk about, they are sort of known, at least to some of you. You may have read it somewhere. And data science, it's not really a brand new discipline. I mean, so it's a lot of people have been doing data science for a long time. It's a new rebranded term, really. It's a rebranding of a lot of existing things that we have been doing. And sometimes I find data science to be an oxymoron, right? Because all science is about data, right? So, but this is what it is, right? So we will talk about some of the ethical aspects. And really, when we are doing data science or we are doing some analysis or getting some actionable insights out of it, out of data, or building a predictive model, what are some of the issues? What are some of the ethical concerns that are there? Yes.
Privacy?
Yes, I mean, privacy is one of them. But yes, I mean, there is a lot more that needs to be the impact of your model, for instance, or your analysis in the society and economy, or the human side of it. So we'll talk about some of those issues. And if you, this is brand new talk, the first time being delivered. So if you find anything that you think is missing, I mean, the way I usually present is I encourage people to participate, and it shouldn't be a monologue. It has to be a dialogue, right? So just if you see anything missing, just feel free to just step in and let me know. So here is how we'll proceed. We will talk about, give an overview in general about the ethical aspects of data science. We'll look at some controversies, some not so new, some fairly recent. We'll look at some ethical dilemmas when all of this machine learning and data and data-driven actions, all of this they are becoming more and more prevalent. What are some dilemmas that we are facing as a society, as humans, as someone who's building the model? And then some thoughts on responsibilities and best practices when you're dealing with building models, or and it doesn't have to be predictive models, that doesn't have to be machine learning, just anything related to data. What are the best practices, and what are the responsibilities of someone who's building or getting actionable insights out of data? Okay. So if you look at this, a typical data science pipeline, so it's a very, it's not a very fine-grained view of things. But think about that a typical data science pipeline, whether it's a machine learning model or whether it is just an insight. It doesn't have to be a predictive model. Maybe you may be doing clustering. You may be just doing some reporting. Just anything that falls under that realm of data science. There are roughly these 4 stages, right? So you start with acquisition. And in a typical data science pipeline, when you're talking about acquisition, what kind of information are we obtaining? Do we have consent? And are participants harmed in any way? So we will see actually what I mean, because sometimes, I mean, when you're acquiring data, you may be you may have the consent, but consent for what? Did they share? I mean, so just like so when we sign up for for Facebook or any other service, it's a long terms this terms and conditions. I mean, nobody reads that fine print, right? What are we doing? I mean, are we signing up pretty much everything about our privacy, just signing it off? So what kind of consent? And so when you're acquiring data, we'll talk about some of the ethics around the acquisition aspect of it. Then preparation. If you have some data and you have some fields, some features or some aspects of the data. Should we consider all aspects? For instance, if we are predicting, I will talk about this example, you're predicting crime or poverty, or should race be a factor or not? Are we perpetuating some injustices as a society when we are using those things in our modeling or in our decision making? Then if you look at this, I mean, so both in acquisition and preparation, is the data encrypted? The Equifax example, or is the data secure or guarded well or not? Then in the modeling, I mean, does your model carry bias? As much as we would like to believe, as you know, I mean, all those journalists, they will write anything, right? Their stretch of imagination, they will tell you that yeah, AI is taking over the world. But the reality is, your models are as smart as how good your data is. If your data is not good, your model cannot be good, right? Even if you have good data, the person building the model is not good, the model is going to suck. I mean, so that's a reality, right? So it's does your model have some inherent bias? Did you deal with all the biases? I mean, was randomization done correctly before handing the data to the model, or within the model if there is some randomization going on in the modeling process? Interpretation. We tend to interpret things. It's not always intentional, but as human beings, we tend to be biased. I mean, and it's not really intentional, as we'll see through a few examples, that intentionally or unintentionally we're trying to validate when we are looking at some data or looking at some insights, we're trying to validate certain things that we have already, some opinions that we have already formed. And unless we see data in that fashion, we do not actually necessarily agree with the insights. We'll try to poke holes in the analysis. And if it is consistent with what our belief is, we'll say, yeah, it makes sense, whether it does make sense actually or not, right? So there are some pitfalls in this interpretation stage as well. So one of the challenges that we have in data analysis is that data literacy is not very common. People don't understand the bias, the potential pitfalls of data. I will have some examples shortly. And interpretation of data, it requires intuition and some experience. If you don't have that experience or intuition, it's very unlikely that you will get good insights out of your data. And as I said, intuition is needed, but intuition requires experience. If someone has not been working on data for some time, it's very unlikely that they will come up with the right insights out of data. Of not all the scenarios, but in some tricky or uncommon scenarios, you may actually, an experienced person may look at the same data and come up with a different insight, versus a person with not so much experience may come up with a different insight. A lot of problems can happen. Problems with sampling and randomization and class imbalance and noise and outliers, we can go on, right? So these are some common issues that you will have there. So let's look at this one here. Maybe someone has, some of you may have already seen this one, but let's look at this here.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13.
You got it?
But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Yes.
You did? Okay. It's impressive.
Go!
So how many of you actually did find the moonwalking bear? I'm just out of curiosity. 3 of you. Were you counting as well at the same time?
Yeah. But I got 12 though, I didn't get 13.
Okay, sounds good. So I hope all of you get the point, right? So the thing is that the video was in a completely different context, but I love the video because this is how we are wired as a human being. I mean, so this is what we do. If you're not looking for something, it's very easy to miss that, right? So if in my data, I know that this is what I want out of my data, I will only look for what I want from my data. I'm not going to actually go and seek things that my hypothesis or my intent was not to actually look for that. So I will. It's very easy to miss those things. So, what are your thoughts on these 4 data sets here? Do they look visibly different, distinctly different? Mm-hmm. Yes. They look very different, right? So all 4 data sets, right? So you have x value and y value, x value and y value, and again, what if I told you that in all cases the mean of x and variance of x and mean of y and variance of y and correlation between x and y is the same?
Yes. Yeah. What's it called?
Anscombe's quartet, right? So if you look at this here, if I visualize this data, the data is very distinctly unique, distinctly different from all the data sets are different. If I look at these numbers, they are the same. So probably I think after this example, you would never ever trust any data, right? So you will say, okay, so I mean, what do I believe here, right? Because this is, yes.
Well, I mean, so could you go back to the plots? So I mean, that's just doing linear regression on the points.
So linear regression is just to show the trending here, right? But the point, the way they are distributed in the xy space, xy plane, I was referring to that, right? So if I were to visualize, these look different data sets. Yeah. If I look at this, I have all the reasons to believe that probably it is the same data set, right?
Oh, okay, I see what
so it is. So linear regression, the line is there just to show that trending there. I mean, so what would, but I was more referring to the summary stats and the visual representation or the spread of the points.
So you can't just take the summary, right? You need to be able to look at the summary statistics and with its visualization.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
At least in this case, right? So because typically what we would do is we would either look at this exploring and looking at the summary stats and so on, right? So, but yeah.
Well, no, sorry. Well, the reason why the linear regression caught my eye is like typically like I mean, and I'm asking more like for your opinion and experience here. I mean, when you're doing I guess like line of best fit modeling, that sort of thing. I mean, what sort of options do you have like available to you?
When you're doing building a linear model?
Yeah, or not necessarily linear, but I guess crafting a line of best fit for the data that you have. Because generally, I mean, for a few of those plots, like a linear line, in my opinion, would not be the best.
Sure, but in this case, I mean, you may not want to have a representation like this, right? So the point was actually to look at the points themselves, so how the points look like, and also the summary stats, right? Not necessarily the model, but I mean, if you have questions about what are the considerations, right? So when you're building a model, you will worry about possibly the mean absolute error or root mean squared error or coefficient of determination, right? So and whether how much of penalty there is on overfitting, right? So there are some factors that are that you would consider when you're building a model for predicting y based on x. Yeah. And in this case, in this case, we are just looking at either the visualization or the summary stats. That's the idea here. Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other thoughts, questions? Okay. Let's look at this. So there was a lawsuit. I don't remember what year, but a while ago. And this is what it looks like. If you look at the number of applicants, 8,442 men and then women, admission rate 44% and 35%. And lawsuit was There's gender bias in applications.
Such a small difference.
It's a big difference. I mean, if you look at it, it is a big difference, right? I mean, 9% difference is quite a lot, I guess, right?
Wasn't the issue that women were applying to highly competitive programs?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Yeah, so therefore.
So if you look at this, women were actually, mostly women were applying to highly competitive programs, right? So for instance, in this one, there were, first look at the admission rate for women, 82% versus 62% for men, 68 versus 63, 34 versus 37, 35 versus 33, 24 versus 28, and 7 versus 6. So in most cases, women have a higher acceptance rate. But women were also applying to the departments where acceptance rate was overall low in general. And now if you look at this here, this one, pretty low acceptance rate, this one, pretty low acceptance rate, and even in this case, both of them have low acceptance rate. But when you take the weighted average there, it shows up a low number. This is called Simpsons paradox, right? So, and again, this is not something that everyone can understand unless they have known, they know what Simpsons paradox is, right? So in this case, the majority of the women are in areas where, in departments where the acceptance rate is traditionally low. Overall, when you aggregate this, their acceptance rate is going to come out to be low. But within each of the departments, when you segment the data, it seems to be fairly high acceptance rate. Okay. So that's this thing is called Simpsons paradox, right? So and it exists. The way to look at this is that you may actually see that overall something, some trend looks in one direction. When you segment it by different segments, the trend exactly opposites in every single segment. And you will say, what's going on? How is it even possible? But when you look at the numbers, if you have interpreted numbers in the past, and if you know how to interpret this, you will not make this mistake. OK. So let's look at some controversies here. Some not so new, some new. Here's one of the examples. So in NYPD, the mayor's office in NYPD in New York, they implemented this stop and frisk practice based on historic data. Based on historic data, they had some evidence, and they said, OK, yeah, I mean, so these features matter. Let's start implementing this, and then randomly start apprehending people or frisking people who belong to certain demographic group, right? So it was ruled unconstitutional. And the question as a data scientist that you would face, or data analyst that you would face is, should if your data represents some certain things like this, should those factors be considered or not? This is more of a ethical question. I mean, so I would say it's sort of a dilemma, right? So some people would argue, yeah, I mean, if the data proves this way, let's go do it. Others will say, no, I mean, it sets a dangerous precedent for the society, right? And I will not actually, I have my own opinion on this, but I would say, yeah, I mean, make up your mind on which way you want the society to go, right? So I mean, so how should this be done, and how should this be interpreted? Because on one hand, you're preventing crime. On the other hand, and as a society, you are setting some precedents, right? So what's the right thing to do? This is another, and so in this case, I would say that the question is, if a feature or if a signal is available in the data, that has some economic or some historic origins, right? So based on certain things that we have faced as a society or as a country, right? So what should we do about this? Just a question, no answers here, right? So I will just ask the question and then leave everyone thinking here. The next thing was this syphilis study. So in this case, there was this federal program that ran for a little over 40 years. And there were some black men who were treated for a disease without their knowledge with placebo, even after the decades after the treatment was discovered, just to continue research. This is data science, right? So, as I said, data science is a fancy name for what all of us have been doing for decades now. And of course, many people, they did not know, they were not getting better, but they thought they were getting a treatment, but they never got the treatment that they needed. And of course, it resulted in drove some regulations on informed consent. So you have to, just consent is not enough, because maybe they were told you are part of the study, you will be given a medication, but unfortunately you are in the placebo group, you are not in the treatment group, right?
So
yes.
they did checkbox the rule of.
Yeah, but it's like terms and conditions or terms of service that you sign up for the blanket terms of service.
Well,
Yeah.
I was going to say, but what about when you're doing blind studies, where you don't want the person to know, but
That's why it's hard.
Yeah.
Doing data science ethically is hard, right?
You're consenting to possibly taking the placebo.
Okay.
And that is explicit in the
Okay.
Yeah.
And one thing that many people don't realize about the effects of this study, to this day, black people are less willing to go to the doctor because they think something like this might happen.
And so, David, thanks for bringing this in. I did not know this. Right? So, think about this. So sometimes one may argue, how would you do research? Because maybe the people who were conducting this, they had noble goals, right? And they were convinced that they had noble goals because they are going to cure this disease for long. But if there's a mistrust, if black people, they start not going to doctors just because of this, it's as a society you lose. You don't win as a society, right? So that's thanks, David. Okay. Anyone knows about this? Stanford prison experiment. So the prison experiment was that they hired college students to play a part. Some of them were inmates, and others became the jailers or who were the guards. And so what happened was, and go and look it up. I think it's the first link that shows up is Wikipedia when you search for Stanford prison experiment. The people who were working as guards, they knew it was a role playing, right? So it was not that nobody knew about it. It was just purely role playing. They became more and more sadistic with the passage of time. And the people who were actually inmates, they started just losing the mind. So psychological issues, and severe distress for inmates, and eventually experiment was shut down within days of starting.
How long was the experiment for?
What is that?
How long was the experiment for?
Actually, it was supposed to be for months, but ended in days.
Within days, people got into psychological distress?
You are underestimating, right? So when if half of us become guards and half of us become inmates, there's a whole theory, right? The guards were wearing those dark tinted glasses, so nobody could see what their expressions and all of that, right? So apparently it ended up being something disastrous, and then they had to shut down the experiment. So Milgram's experiment, anyone knows about this? Again, So the experiment was, it was conducted at Yale, 1961, July. And subjects believed that they were electrocuting the setting was that you had the learner and the trainer. And the trainer was actually asking questions. If the learner did not answer the questions correctly, they would give them a shock, electric shock, and then they would keep increasing with every wrong answer, they would keep increasing the level of the shock. As it turns out, so people, other person, and then it was random to the general public, but actually it turns out that every single time the learner, the person who would get the shock, was from the research group, and the person who was giving the shock was from the general populace, right? So that was the setting. And now there was no shock actually, but the person would scream based on acting.
And they just kept going.
They kept going. And some people, I have a video actually, I found this video. So there is, and some people, they would have qualms about, okay, should I continue? And then someone would say, okay, yeah, continue. And I don't want to spoil the fun. Let's look at the video. So actors, they feign pain and test of human obedience and morals, right? So the question was that I think the study was related to some of the Nazi camps when they were doing all this torture and all of that, right? So they said, okay, is that specific to those people who were in guards in that camp? Is it only specific to those people? Or is any human being capable of doing this? And that was the idea. So if there is an authority telling you, go do this, I know what I'm doing, would I do it? If someone is telling me, yeah, I know what I'm doing, just go do your job. Or someone will just say, no, I disagree, I will not do it, no matter what you do, right? And I think they were paid $4.50 per hour or $4.50 for the whole experiment. I don't know, but I have this number in mind. And response to authority and dehumanization. And deception and uninformed consent, because of course the people who were doing it, they must have been going through a lot of distress as well, right? Let's look at this, and I hope we can play this video. And caused emotional distress for subjects. So let's look at this.
Psychologist Stanley Milgram had also looked at how we respond to authority. In order to understand how people were induced to obey unjust regimes and participate in atrocities such as the Holocaust, he set up an experiment. Volunteers were told they were taking part in scientific research to improve memory.
Would you open those and tell me which of you is which, please? Teacher. Where? Teacher.
Separated by a screen, the teacher would ask the learner questions in a word game and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Cloud. Horse. Rock. House. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer. Horse.
Experiment, that's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
Refuses to go on. The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor and the so-called shocks harmless.
You're gonna get a shock. 180 volts.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of
You
here.
can't stand it. I'm not gonna kill that man there. I mean, who's gonna take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman?
I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please.
All right, next one. Slow. Walk, dance, truck, music.
Two-thirds of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering for less voltage. Can't you check in and see if he's all right, please?
Milgram's findings horrified America. They showed that decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I will go and continue here. So let's continue. Let's look at a few modern examples here. How many of you know about this, that Facebook was manipulating news feeds for the users in a way that some users would randomly see negative news, and some users would see positive news. And as a result, their finding was that people who saw more negative news, they in turn acted negative. And the people who saw positive news, they actually in turn acted positive on Facebook. Right? How many of you know about it? Yeah, so a few of you. Okay. So yeah, I mean,
sorry, when you say reacted negative,
their comments to their usual things. I mean, their behavior was more negative on Facebook, right?
So like what they would post? Or
They will post stuff, angry stuff, or just negative. In general, express negative emotions on.
What they were doing is they were aggregating according to two different filters and running an experiment without telling anybody.
Yes. So usually A/B testing is done that way. So at any given time, if I go to Amazon or Google or Facebook, right? So I can be in any experiment, and I don't know. I can be in maybe perhaps 20 or 30 different experiments at any given time, right? And A/B testing is absolutely fine, right? So which is it's a must for any online service except for this thing, because this is not an A/B test. This is more of a psychology test than an A/B test, and this is what they were doing. And this is again, I would not even call this borderline. I mean, this was a clear violation of any ethical standards, right? But Facebook, they can get away with this. I mean, power of corporations. I mean, what can we do? It's Facebook, right? Then other thing, Facebook also they were doing experimenting with some people randomly were selected. They were shown that this I voted button, and others were not shown randomly. But think about this, that this can have implications on US elections. If Facebook decides, potentially, they can impact the outcome of elections. And you don't want your democracy to be so vulnerable to just a company manipulating. Not that they were doing it, but there are certain things. The question again is, they may have some intent. They can experiment on other things, but something as sensitive as this, the question is whether should they be experimenting on this or not. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Let's look at some ethical dilemmas here. So this is a Tesla video, and I have my own opinion about this video. I mean, so how accurate this is, but we are actually getting into that. We are at this time in history that we see that potentially vehicles can be completely autonomous, right? They can be doing auto driving. But the question that we need to now ask is this. Let me just go here. The question that we need to ask is, can machines learn ethics? What if the choice is between harm to the driver or harm to pedestrians? In more complicated situation, like this vehicle is going harm to the driver or the car. On the left side, there is an adult. On the right side, there is a child. I think naturally, as humans, we are wired in some certain way. Probably we will avoid the child and go towards either, so. But definitely, I think the child would be the last thing, right? So, but how would machine react? And the question is, who's going to be sued in this case? So how do we inculcate or how do we teach machines ethics? Again, a question, open-ended question. We are still in that process of actually, this is happening as we speak. I mean, this is we don't have any car yet that is completely autonomous in all the scenarios, but we are getting there. So what will be the how would the lawmaking happen? And the interesting thing is, I don't know, I was where, but I was having this discussion with someone. European Union, I think they are trying to get some regulations around AI and all of that. The funny thing is, even fairly techie people don't understand AI or machine learning. How would the lawmakers understand what AI is? Because it's not just some other common issues, right? So I mean, it's a fairly delicate business. How would they understand all the intricacies of this discipline? How would they make laws? So in this case,
you know, I kind of disagree with that approach because we don't need to understand AI to worry about the impacts, and so we can very well decide going back from impacts rather than trying to model AI as a domain and then try to partial it and say, if this happens with autonomous vehicles, then we should implement this kind of rule. Instead of that, we can go back from impacts and say, here are the things that we are in general as a society worried. Which parts of these domains could impact the things that we really do worry about? Then the rest can take it.
Okay, so my view in this case is because we know inherently, as much as we would like to believe, machines will make mistakes, and they are going to be. How many people do understand that machines can make mistakes? From my experience, my limited experience with people, most people think that once machine learns, I mean, they never make mistakes, right? A lot of people, I mean, so you would be surprised. I mean, so maybe you're not one of those. And then how do you interpret, right? So how do you, when you are making laws, you have to know the limitations of certain things. So in this case, I mean, what should be the law? I mean, if this happens, is the driver responsible? Or the car responsible? The car is not an entity. Is Tesla responsible for this? So I was thinking about this in that regard.
Yeah, but there is a difference between legal liability and ethics, right?
Well, I was talking about lawmaking, right? So ethics, ethics might be, I think, again, ethics also.
Well, they intersect, but they are not the same thing.
Yeah,
Law,
because
you can make someone whole.
Yeah.
You are always looking for restitution. Make someone whole after an incident, right? But in ethics, you don't have that. Your responsibility is actually infinite.
Okay.
So there is no reconstitution of ethical.
Okay. But I mean, do you think ethics are black and white? In many cases. No, I mean, so what I want to say is, I mean, is there a clear distinction between right and wrong?
Yes, there are ethics that are very clear, very specific about what is the right thing to do.
That's why we trust juries. That's why we trust juries. The jury doesn't know anything about the domain, but yet we trust them to make the right decision. Because if we can clearly explain to someone who is...
Let me give you this example, because I mean, I'm glad you brought this up, right? So I have a friend who's a seasoned manager at Microsoft. He was called in for jury. And the case was against wrongful firing of an employee by some employer. And he went to for this, I think there are some people who select the jury, and he said, I don't think I'm going to make an objective decision. No matter what, I'm going to side the employer. Because he has gone through these scenarios where because he perhaps managed a few people out, and he knows that no matter how objective he wants to be, he is going to be biased, right? So when you say, I mean, so is he a bad person? No, I know him. He has a lot of integrity. but there's some certain things that he cannot do anything about because he has seen this over and over. He thinks that if someone fires someone, there must be some reason that they fire that person. Does it happen all the time? Does it happen all the time? No. People are wrongfully fired. I know that, yeah.
Juries are randomly picked.
No, but they're randomly picked, and then they're selected from that random pool, right? Yes, please.
Question about our purpose tonight. We could debate a lot in the room about this. I'm wondering if you intend to address things like, are there algorithmic ways to demonstrate bias? Are there ways where you apply controls because you're dealing with actuators as opposed to sensors? Are you going to go to those kinds of topics?
I can go, right? So it's not part of the presentation. I mean, I wanted to keep it lightweight today, but I mean, can you detect bias algorithmically? But the algorithm that detects bias itself, yes. I mean, so you can find out if the data has bias, sure, you can do that, right? But your algorithm that you design to detect bias, how do you prevent that algorithm to be biased itself? Yes, it is. You are stuck in an infinite loop, right? So I think when it comes to data science and making decisions based on data science, having an understanding, and towards the end I will talk about that as well. Having an understanding that you have a responsibility. First of all, knowing that what could go wrong. That's extremely important. Knowing the fundamentals, it is extremely important. But having a sense of immense responsibility that your model may actually result in someone being put on chemotherapy, or someone losing their life, or someone denied denied credit, right? So we'll talk about all of those issues, and I would be more than happy to have the general discussion around things. But the discussion that we are having, I would say this is very relevant because it is all about interpretation of data. I mean, what we know and how we perceive things, because machines exactly do what humans would do with a lot of data, right? So I mean, that's what machines do. Okay. Then there is another one here. Let's look at this. And again, this one somehow worked.
I used to think my job was all about arrests, chasing bad guys. Now I see my work differently. We analyze crime data, spot patterns, and figure out where to send patrols. It's helped some U.S. cities cut serious crime by up to 30%. By stopping it before it happens. Let's build a smarter planet.
Okay. So, again, it's a dilemma. What do you do in this case? Do you round up this person or you don't? Both there can be arguments on both sides, right? If we take someone's prior history of crime, so basically we are saying this as a society that this person does not have the right to again ever live a normal life again, right? So issues further dilemmas, granting parole. I actually was surprised that in some cases it has become a reality that parole is being granted to people based on some predictive models, based on their past behavior and so on, and considering many factors. Detecting disease. If you false positives and false negatives both have their pros and cons. Military strikes. Legit target or civilians. What do you do? And also, if the data is available, the informed consent that we saw, the example that we saw, if we have consent, a blanket consent, can we just go and use the data, whatever data we like? Okay. So, and what data can we use? if the data is available, if I can crawl and crawl the web and scoop some data. There are some websites actually that you pay them $2 or $3, and then they will give you everything about someone's life just for a mere $2 or $3 because they have somehow aggregated all the data from all sources. Okay. So I will talk about the responsibilities and best practices here. So first of all, why should one care? So if you don't care about ethics, in some cases there are severe regulatory or legal concerns. If you don't preserve the privacy, or if there is something called the PII, personally identifiable information. If you don't care about that, there can be serious fines there. The other thing is that your models, they have an impact on economy and society and lives of individuals, and I can keep going here, right? So that's why we should be worried about this. And most importantly, right? So I think what even when we run a business, so when we come into contact with data and other things, I mean, how should we send people emails and all of that? I think this is a golden rule. I mean, so treat others the way that you like to be treated. That's if you know this, because this is using data for making data-driven decisions. It is absolutely essential in this day and age. Most of us do this for a living, right? So, but what kind of data can we use, and what kind of data is off limits? That's the question. And this is probably the easiest test. If you don't like this to be done to yourself, don't do it to someone else, right? If you don't want your social to be exposed, don't go and seek someone else's social. If you don't like your personal life history to be exposed, don't go and seek someone else's life history, even if it makes your analysis very robust. Just draw a line somewhere, right? That's where I would draw a line for myself, actually, as a data scientist here. So first and foremost thing here is competence. So one might say that, is this really an ethics issue? I consider this a very much an ethics issue, because if you are not competent enough, if you don't understand the intricacies of this, don't do it. Don't practice medicine if you're not a certified doctor or if you're not experienced enough, right? So don't go and keep telling people that I'm good at it when you're not, when you have no clue. So so in this case, the view is ignorance is not an excuse. Data literacy, as I talked about, if one does not understand those finer points, keep out of the business, or don't tell people to take actions, especially when human lives or if it's a sensitive issue. So a lot of things: general data literacy, domain understanding, technical competence, awareness of pitfalls in general, and understand the limitations of data science. I think this is where many people fail. Because when I build a model, I built this model, it has to be good, right? I mean, so that's the approach. But for those of you who have built enough models, you would know that it's a humbling exercise. When you build models, your models are not. I teach data science for a living, right? So, and a general question that I get is how good the model can be, right? So should a model be 100% accurate, or 98% accurate, 95% accurate? What most of the population does not understand is there's no benchmark there for a good model, right? A 95% accurate model, or maybe accuracies, you don't even care about accuracy in certain cases, right? So 95% accurate model may be a bad model, and a 70% accurate model can be a very good model. It depends upon how complex the problem is and how much data you had and all of those issues. So there's no benchmark there. So data science has its, and machine learning has its limitations. Your models can be wrong. Your machine learning models and your data science or insights can be wrong at times. Data representation. Understand the issues around data representation, the quality and the quantity and variety. Bias in data gathering. You may be oversampling or undersampling You may be oversampling or undersampling some subsegment of the population. Yes.
Yeah. Well, could you go and dive down a little bit more into the oversampling piece? Because I mean, would you not be able to, after the fact, be able to, I guess, cut out bits of?
Yeah, but only if you know. Only if you know. So what I'm saying is that a lot of times the analysis team and the data gathering team, sometimes they probably don't know each other in extreme cases, right? And in some cases they know each other, but they don't talk to each other, right? There can be so many organizational issues, and you might not even know that the data that you're getting is it's not even representative of your all of your customer base or all of your actual data. Someone just decided, because they don't do analysis on a daily basis, yes, they said, yeah, let's log this, and maybe the most important fields are not even being gathered. What do you do? Right? So there can be issues around that as well. So there can be issues that are part of there can be systematic problems that are someone from upstream, someone is sending stuff to you, and you're being impacted. And there can be something that you might be doing accidentally, intentionally or otherwise. Many different things are possible in this case. Sometimes recency, your data is stale, or maybe you needed better data for getting better insights, newer data to get better insights, and then you don't have that data. And most importantly, I mean, you have the most important factors that are missing. What do you do in that case? You don't even know your data has problems, right? So you have to, I think in this case, domain understanding and your intuition, and then your experience is the key. If you have the domain understanding and your intuition and your experience, you will say something does not look right. I mean, so it will help you actually gather more data, or perhaps fix any issues with your data there. Data protection and privacy. It can be a serious legal issue as well, as we saw recently in Equifax breach example. So we had a lot of people, their PII was stolen. And anyone was just curious. I mean, they said that about 50% of the US was impacted, roughly. Was anyone impacted? Have you checked? You should, because I was impacted. I mean, my wife was not. I was impacted. So, and
what are you going to do?
I think you can put a block on your, you can freeze your credit. And I was able to actually do that. And I checked it like a few weeks or months later, actually. Someone told me that go check, and then I'm glad that I did.
Oh, they didn't notify you? You have to go check?
I don't think so.
Yes, and sometimes you have to pay.
So, no, but so
Yeah.
you have to go check. They didn't send you.
That's right.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
But I think there was this site where you can go and check, and then if you were impacted, then they would implement credit monitoring for free or something like that. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, this is a major issue, right? And I can give you these examples. I mean, so you would be surprised, but as a company, you deal with some government agencies, right? So one of the government agencies, they did not save my password encrypted. I sent them a password reset request. They sent me the exact string that I had used there. And I could not believe my eyes at that time. I mean, so I don't want to name the agency, but some of the local Washington State, there's 4 or 5 of them that a company would deal with, right? And they sent me exact password that I've used other places as a string. They did not even bother telling me, okay, go reset this. So they were saving the string. So I mean, think about this, that all of these things, it's a sheer competence issue, right? I mean, so they should know that this is 2016 or 2017, yes.
And also, I feel that our notion of personal identifiable information is already becoming obsolete. The example that I like to use is location data, right? If you use Google Maps, say, it is tracking where you go.
Yep. Yeah.
Right? So what we legally require you to do is to strip out your name out of that. It still has your location from, at 7 a.m. in the morning, you start at 307 North 173rd Street.
Yep. Yeah.
Every morning. I wonder who that is.
Yeah. And so leaves from that location and lands in Orange Studios. Yep. Name is gone, but it must be Raja, right? So and that's yeah. So yeah, I mean, so thanks, David. So the notion of PII, right? So it has changed, and this is the new reality for us, right? Rigor. I think this is a piece that a lot of us miss. Again, while running these training courses, a lot of times people would say, man, this is hard work. We thought it is machine learning and machine would learn itself. But the problem is that machines don't learn in something as much as we would want to. There's no machine learning for machine learning, right? So you have to actually, you have to adjust, you have to tune the parameters, you have to work hard, you have to figure out, you have to do feature engineering. So rigor is the key. You have to actually make sure that every single step from gathering the data to cleaning the data to engineering the features to tuning the parameters to the choice of the algorithm that you have and the choice of the evaluation metrics, all of that has to go through a rigor. I mean, so rigorous, this has to be a very rigorous process. And this is one good example. Ron Fisher, he's the father of modern statistics. He actually used to clean the cages of animals himself because he did not trust someone else, that if someone else cleans it with, making it up, Clorox, and then the animals die, I mean, you might think that it was the treatment, but it was not. But you call it a micromanager, right? So, I mean, call him a micromanager, right? But I would actually agree with him because sometimes you have to micromanage. I mean, something is critical. Steve Jobs, if you look at him, I mean, people would say, I mean, he was a micromanager. I mean, he would just
yeah. That brings up an interesting issue, though, with more and more, as a company, you're relying on other companies that are doing their own analytics, and you're an assumer of the analytics. How do you establish the validity and the rigor of those processes?
So if you're are you getting insights from another company? So there are two. I have seen companies receiving data from other companies, and I've seen companies receiving analytics and processed insight.
Their analytics, you rely on their models. Starting to feed into
your. Sure. So I mean, in many cases, there's not much you can do. But if you're gathering analytics not just from them, and from other, sometimes, I mean, you have multiple sources of analytics, right? And you may be able to benchmark. You may be able to see if there's any systematic problems. I mean, so insights are correct or not. There can be some statistical tests if it's at the data level, not at the insights level. So there can be actually ways to detect problems. In some cases, there's not much you can do. You just have to deal with this as a fact of life. This is what it is. One more thing that you have to have a very concrete and crisp hypothesis. And when you start some analysis, you have to have a very crisp hypothesis. It's you cannot really you cannot explain things in hindsight. You cannot just go back and say, yeah, I mean, I expected this, but this is happening, and now I can explain this, right? So in in clinical trials, it is, or in general hypothesis testing, this is considered a bad practice. It's considered cheating. If my medication was supposed to lower cholesterol, it is supposed to lower cholesterol. I mean, if there is another impact that happens, no. I mean, you cannot say that this is a medication for I don't know, just weight loss or something else, right? So you have to really be honest to your hypothesis. You have to know what is the impact, how much is the impact, and humility, right? So that's not very common. You have to actually be prepared to be wrong. I mean, there's no shame in this because this is what science is about, right? So what you wanted to do, yeah, you did not see it. You saw something else. Go back and try to understand what is that something else. Is it just an accident? Is it some issue with the data? Is it something temporarily that happened? There was a glitch in the system, and go back and explain it. But don't say that if you see something quite the opposite, just don't say, yeah, I mean, I found it. I mean, just don't say I found it and move on, right? So your hypothesis has to be very crisp and clear, and make sure that you stick to that hypothesis or reframe your hypothesis based on your learnings. Awareness of the human side of things. I mean, so this is extremely, extremely critical as we become, as a society. I think it's pretty much many things that we see in our daily lives, they probably did not exist just 5 years ago, right? You get into the car, you're connected to the car using Bluetooth, and suddenly message pops up, this much time to this address. You get in front of your computer, you log in, right? And vehicles avoiding collisions, and so many things that are happening now. And we have to be aware of the human side of things. If a data set ties crime, homelessness, or terrorism to a certain demographic, what would you do? How would you handle this kind of data set? And again, questions. I leave it to everyone. This is questions, really. As we talked about this, I mean, so granting parole, false positives versus false negatives. If someone was not granted a parole, and the person was actually, he or she deserved it, versus someone was granted a parole and they ended up committing a crime, right? So how do you find that balance? Again, alleged targets versus civilians. What do you do? So there is this thing called a Hippocratic oath. It is an oath taken by all physicians historically, and requires any physician to swear by a number of healing gods, Greek healing gods, I think I missed it, to uphold specific ethical standards. So I found this interesting things, a modeler's oath. I will remember that I did not make the world, and it does not satisfy my equations. I will always remember that. Though I will use models boldly to estimate value, I will not be overly impressed by mathematics. I will never sacrifice reality for elegance without explaining why I have done so. I will not give the people who use my model false comfort about its accuracy. Instead, I will make explicit its assumptions and oversights. I understand that my work may have enormous impact on society and the economy, many of them beyond my comprehension. So I think there has to be some sort of oath in this case as well. I mean, I seriously, sincerely believe this thing, that anyone who works in this discipline, because as more and more people, we are getting in that, we are approaching the time in history where every company is gathering more and more data. The companies that were not gathering data, they are gathering data. Some companies that had been gathering data, they are gathering more and more data and then going towards insights. And need for people who understand and can do things in this space, so-called data scientists. The need is increasing. More people are joining this profession. There has to be some sense of responsibility amongst people who are actually working in this space, especially the human side of it, and the impact on the society, impact on the economy, impact on our general day-to-day lives.
But that's just about everything.
This is about everything, right? I mean, yeah, but the impact in this case is different, right? So the scale of impact in this case, it's phenomenal, right? So I mean, for instance, right? So if I'm a clerk or a cashier at grocery store, right? There has to be some ethics there as well, right? I will greet the customer, I will smile, I will not overcharge them, right? So there has to be some ethics there as well, but their impact is probably for that store or for that specific person that they, or the specific set of people that they come in contact with. But in this case, you don't even know where your model is going to be used. You built the model, your company goes and starts selling the model, and then now millions of lives are being impacted. So there has to be an appreciation. Not many people actually talk about ethics. We actually had a corporate training somewhere at some company. We wanted to add this module, and they said, okay, can you include something else instead of this module? Because not many people worry about this, but I would actually consider this as an important aspect of data science. I mean, so all of us who are working in this, we should know the impact and understand all of these subtle and not so subtle issues. Certain things are very obvious, other things require some experience. Okay?
Are you not saying that basically when you compare with the doctors, they have doctoral ethical commissions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying that now there should be like data science?
There has, and it will happen. I mean, I'm sure it is going to happen, because like medicines.
And similar, like in medicine, you have like lawyers that are supporting them for everything that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like
because of the impact in that case, right? Just like doctors have an impact, right? I mean, so if I'm a doctor, I come in contact with a patient. There are many things I can do. I can overcharge them. I can invade their privacy. I cannot, based on their socioeconomic status, I may or may not treat them well or not treat them correctly, right? So many things can go wrong there. So I think what I'm implying here is that probably in this case, maybe our impact is slightly bigger. Think about the basic research. I think this is something similar to basic research, right? So when you're getting a drug approved in a clinical trial, right? And if you falsify your research results, that can have impact, right? So in that sense, right, that we want to have a good sense of at least an effort to understand what is right and wrong. I mean, so we may not always make the right decision, but at least if we make a conscious effort to make the right decision, I think that is the minimum.
Then do you see like some kind of body like FDA
FDA is specifically, I think I would say that FDA is again a data science body, because they, in some ways, they look at how the experiment was conducted. I mean, whether the randomization was correct. They are actually doing the same thing. I don't know if there can be an industry-wide body like this, but I think there has to be a general consensus on what are certain things how certain things can be done. And maybe there are going to be certain things that there will never be a consensus on, right? So should you, in some cases, I mean, so crime prevention, I'm very sure some people will say, I mean, if it results in a few people being apprehended incorrectly or wrongly, it's okay, right? So because this is subjective debate, right? Some people might agree with this, some people might not agree with this, but at least there has to be healthy debate. So we, as a society, we understand the implication and healthy debate, right? So it's.
In the medical world, we have the system of certifications. You can decertify a doctor. You can't really decertify a data scientist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet, and it might not happen, right? So because it's a completely different domains and realms, so it may not happen. But the hope here is just to spread that awareness that there has to be, even if there is no body around, right? So I think ideally all of us, self-regulatory mechanism, right? So we know that we have a responsibility. Because,
for example, let's say for the self-driving cars, like if incident happens with the self-driving cars,
I'm pretty sure that there must be, in that specific case, it has to be.
That at the end they will go to the data scientists who feed the data to the algorithm for the driving.
I don't know who to blame. I mean, it's a person who gathered the data, a person who extracted the features, a person who maybe was building the model. So it's a complex problem. It's a complex problem. But I'm sure in that scenario, I'm glad you pointed out, because it is going to be a subset of this problem space that is going to be very widely used. I'm sure there is going to be some regulatory body around that.
Like air crash investigations.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah.
They try to prove, is it pilot's fault?
Yeah, yeah.
Is it engine, like the machine fault? Or
Yeah, certainly. Yes.
Raj, so much to talk about, right?
Yes, there is so much to talk about. Yeah.
We could spend the next week talking about the portion of which you covered today, and still not exhaust the topic. So, I don't know, not even sure how to start. So, let me congratulate you for taking the initiative.
Yeah, thank you.
And sort of walking into a domain that I think we're learning how to carry this conversation. It's a very difficult conversation. I can see that you're speaking from a practitioner's point of view. Right?
Maybe I'm speaking from an impactee point of view as well. I mean, so I have been impacted by this. I mean, subtle, not so much, but if I travel, I mean, travel a lot, but if I take certain route based on my age, my background, my place of birth, I travel on a US passport, but sometimes I get under that random check and I take it lightly. I mean, so this guy was saying, yeah, it's random. I said, yeah, I mean, I do it for a living, so I know what you're talking about. So, yeah, I mean, I was not offended or anything. I said, I mean, yeah, you're doing your job, so I mean, it's fine, right? So, but 3 times in a row, it's not random, really, right? So it has to be. I mean, so it's still. I mean, but odds are very, very, very low, right? So, fortunately, I mean, in this case, it's not that I was put in jail, right? Nothing happened there, right? But in some cases, someone may actually end up in jail, right? I mean, that is something that's absolutely not desirable, right? So, yeah. So, sorry. So you said that as a practitioner. No, I mean, I have been on the receiving side of this as well. So.
Well, perhaps there's plenty of room there, and they have to kind of overlap. Responsibility as an informed citizen, and also as a data scientist. And I think as a practitioner, the fact that you have been working with different types of machine learning and algorithms, the thinking here is that perhaps by the simple fact that you have that expertise, there are perhaps some tools at your disposal that can help us mitigate some of the issues you have raised. Right? So that's one thing. Another is, if you are going to talk about ethics, ethical dimensions, ethical implications, then I think those who are kind of trying to engage themselves with these sort of issues have to at least do justice to the thinking of the past when it comes to ethics. You've got to sort of learn a little bit about what are the different ethical views, ethical theories out there. You could think of it in terms of consequentialist terms, in terms of deontological views, in terms of virtue ethics, very different views of what it is to live a good life, what is the right thing to do under circumstances X, Y, and Z, and how to model. Because otherwise, it becomes very much a story like, here's a case. Does this resonates with you? You're uncomfortable? But how do you generalize from that? So I think this sort of analytical aspect of data science usually come in by having done justice to a sort of a literature and a history of thinking ethically. We can do some things we can do. So for example, pointing out to the comments that are clearly made about sort of its impact. So the law, for example, the law is not necessarily ethics. When you look at the history of our legal institution, plenty of injustices. Right? But one thing we can do, there are some people thinking long and hard about this, to say, well, at certain domains, the law is very specific, it's very clear about the sort of disparate impacts to certain technologies. You shouldn't discriminate unfairly if it's having a particular disparate impact. So it doesn't matter what's going on in this black box. The fact that the fact that it has certain disparate impacts for certain classes or economics, okay, it's not in agreement, it's not in compliance with the law. Significant contribution. So then we have to be thinking long and hard about what sort of tests, what sort of ways that we can manipulate the data as we feed into this sort of black box algorithm and see the output and see if it's in compliance with the law. That's only one view of an ethical. So you simply assess in terms of consequences.
Sure.
We're better off, or we're less off, or we can model that, and so on.
Yeah.
Another point I want to say, so, and I think this goes back to, if you just allow me, basically. And I see it in tuition. For example, your unifying principle, ethical principle, treat others like you like others. It's a terrible principle. It's a terrible unifying principle. And that's one of the things you learn when you start reading ethics. I mean, just to raise the objection here. Suppose I'm a masochist, and I take a lot of pleasure, a lot of pain. Would you expect me to, should I treat you like that?
Okay.
It's terrible. It's not universalizable.
Okay, so okay. Yeah, so I think I should have, like a mathematician, I should have qualified my principle with some conditions there, right? So I think I should have done that. But you're assuming like someone who's a fairly normal, common human being, right? So, and but because we can actually go on. Yeah.
That's where you lose traction.
Sure.
So I mean, if we want to talk about can we model, can we measure?
Sure. Point taken. Point taken. Let's continue the discussion. Any other thoughts or questions here?
Well, I was going to say, do you think with time, there are certain professions, like you said, doctors, you got like project managers, they have like a code of ethics, and like professional engineers. Do you see that in time that there will be something like this where if you go into the data science field that you would be required to sign? I know.
I don't know requiring to sign, but if I were to design a curriculum for this and a more longer detailed curriculum, I would actually make this part of it, right? So at least make people aware of this, because a lot of people are not even aware of the fact, right? That intentionally or unintentionally, we as humans, we are, I think we may want to be fair, but we may not realize that we are being unfair by just inherently.
I mentioned I'm going to school for analytics right now, and actually we just completed a module on ethics.
Okay.
And I used the data state for the New York City from 2013, where they gave out the data, and really smart software developer was able to get all the sanitized data. Like we were able to identify whose taxi ride it was, so you could use it for stalking, for figuring out the taxi driver's income and stuff like that. And so in schools, they are teaching this, thankfully. So maybe it's not going to be so bad as we're getting trained in these fields, that we're getting that kind of exposure to ethics.
Yeah, certainly. And also I think so a few things, as David pointed out, there's certain standards, they are evolving. When I say standards as a society, perhaps 10 or 15 years ago, nobody would have imagined that they would be posting every single detail of their life in front of public. I mean, so everyone knows exact date when I got married, when I had my first child and my fifth child and my divorce, and right, so and when I was in Hawaii, and then I got married again after Hawaii. So everyone knows every single thing about it. Right? So the concept of what is personally identifiable, I think it is changing. I think I think these standards will probably adjust to some extent, but some of the things will remain the same. I still stand by that bullet, right? Don't do anything that you don't want to be done to yourself, but with those disclaimers, with the fine print, right? I think it is something evolving. I don't know how. I don't expect it to be something common across the industry, but maybe different verticals will have their own. Healthcare may have their own ethical standards when it comes to, for instance, healthcare. My biggest concern is I would like healthcare data to be actually open for doing data science, but my worry is the health insurance companies, because they can actually, if they have all of that data and if they have my data, they can probably predict, I mean, when I'm likely to die, right? So because I know it's not impossible, right? All they need is data, because they can match me with my
Insurance company already predict your like
no, but they don't have a bigger, more data like from everywhere, right? Like, and there are companies that like GE Healthcare and other companies. I mean, they have more data, right? So it is a matter of time. But then, what is ethical and what is not ethical? I mean, so can you deny insurance based on this? Because as a business, they will be. The business team would say, yeah, I mean, why not? We have to be profitable, right? And the human side of it says, I mean, why would you deny insurance, right? So it's these are the dilemmas that we will actually see when that happens. I think I saw a hand here. Someone? Yeah. Yes.
Did you come up with this quote or?
No, I found it, right? So yeah, I found it. Yes, I found it. I was looking for something like this, and then I found it.
Do we need to sign when we exit?
Yeah, at least I think at least all of us can agree that. I mean, so most of us actually are dealing with data as on a day-to-day basis. I think these are common sense. These are common human traits. I mean, so a good human being should actually approach. And I'm not saying if any deviation makes one a bad human being. It's just that there's a general consensus that for society that the things that we discuss, they are.
Don't you think? I mean, so if there was indeed a general consensus, we're more alike than alike. We wouldn't have to be dealing with these issues.
Yeah, well, I'm saying that at least all of us, I mean, within this, we can say, yeah, we will try to actually do this, right? When we go back, there might be a deadline and we have a promotion or a bonus coming in, and then we see a data source that we should not use, and we'll say, yeah, I mean, let's use it because that will bump the numbers, the performance of the model up by 3%, and 3% improvement means $5 million, and then that means I get a promotion, right? So it's very tempting. I mean, so especially in this discipline, you know that you can do certain things and then you can show an impact, right? But at least largely we can say that we will resist that temptation. I mean, we'll make our best judgment call, whatever is wrong for the society, in our opinion, right? So let's say whatever my own moral compass is, or moral ethical compass is, I will remain true to it. I will not say, I mean, just whatever it is. I mean,
I was coming here so hopeful, Raja. Now I'm all hopeful.
It's almost like I'm tying your hands now, right? So
this heroic picture, this sort of superhero.
Yeah.
I was going to say the other way would be to be transparent. So as we are handing over the algorithms, basically attach what the parameters, my artificial neural network, how would I actually figure out the perceptrons? Did I generate my data myself, or did I pick it from some public source, etc.? And then the other thing would be to install callbacks, so that in the future uses can actually penalize me.
Yeah, that's creative. Yeah. It's.
Another blockchain for that.
Blockchain. That's right. Distribute the trust.
Okay.
So there's a wonderful website called darkpatterns.org.
Darkpatterns.org.
That has, so it's by a UI designer. And I raise it because he talks about, so he proposes the idea of a dark pattern is sort of like using usability research for the interests of the company against the interests of the user. And his example is this air purchase website, and it asks what country you're from. And one of the entries under N is no insurance purchase. And that's what you have to click in order to not buy insurance on your ticket,
Mm-hmm.
and that someone did this, and lo and behold, revenue went up. A lot more insurance was
Because
sold.
the default changed?
Because, I don't know what the default is, but that's the
Yes.
thing he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And he holds up as a solution to this that professional societies should have standards so that individual employees can say, I can't do that because my professional society will kick me out if I do that.
Just like that Milgram's experiment, right? So this guy actually was turning around and asking, are you sure? And he said, I'm very sure, go do it, right? So, whistleblowers, right? So, that's, again, the conscience and ethics side of things, right? So that's precisely what, thanks.
I do applaud you for bringing this topic up.
To be continued.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thanks. So, and that's it. So we will end here, and thank you for coming over, and I will still be around. Yeah, thanks.